The first time I saw Kang Ji-Hoon in person, the entire room stopped breathing. It wasn't dramatic in an obvious way. There was no announcement, no music, no theatrical entrance. But power has a presence, and his entered before he did. The boardroom on the 42nd floor overlooked Seoul's endless skyline, glass towers piercing through morning mist, the Han River glistening like silver beneath the pale winter sun. I adjusted the cuff of my blazer and reminded myself that I had earned my seat at that long black marble table. Transferred from the New York branch. Top-performing financial strategist. Harvard MBA. And still, the only black woman in a room full of sharp Korean executives who barely masked their curiosity. The double doors opened. Silence swallowed the air. Kang Ji-Hoon walked in like he owned not just the company, but time itself. Tailored charcoal suit, black tie, hair perfectly styled, not a strand out of place. Expression unreadable. He didn't greet anyone. He didn't nod. He simply took his seat at the head of the table. And the atmosphere shifted from corporate to courtroom. This was the man they called the Ice King. The billionaire CEO who built a global tech empire before 35. The man who acquired failing companies and rebuilt them into market leaders. The man who had never once been photographed smiling in a business setting. His eyes swept across the table, precise, calculating. When they reached me, they stopped. Not for a second. Longer. Too long. I held his gaze. I refused to be the first to look away. A subtle flicker crossed his dark eyes. Not surprise. Not disapproval. Recognition. "You're late," he said, his voice smooth but cold enough to frost glass. Every executive immediately looked at me. My heartbeat slowed instead of racing. "I'm exactly on time," I replied calmly, sliding my tablet onto the table. The meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. It's 8:59. A pause. Someone cleared their throat. Ji-Hoon's gaze shifted to the clock on the wall. Then back to me. The corner of his mouth almost moved. "Noted," he said. And just like that, the meeting began. For 2 hours, I presented projected growth forecasts for the company's American expansion, highlighting flaws in the current acquisition strategy. Then, twice my age shifted uncomfortably when I pointed out inefficiencies. I didn't sugarcoat. I didn't apologize. When I finished, silence filled the room again. Most executives avoided eye contact. But not him. Ji-Hoon leaned back slowly in his chair, fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Continue," he said. I blinked. "Sir, you stopped before the risk mitigation model." He had noticed. Not just skimmed my proposal, studied it. So I continued. And when I finished again, he spoke only 4 words. "She stays on this." That was it. No praise. No applause. But in Kang Ji-Hoon's language, it was approval. The days that followed were colder than the Seoul winter. He was distant, unapproachable, efficient to the point of intimidation. Employees scattered when he stepped into hallways. Assistants trembled when delivering reports. He never raised his voice. He didn't need to. But I began noticing something. Every time I presented, he was there. Every time I entered a room unexpectedly, his gaze would already be on me. Not obvious. Not inappropriate. Calculated. Measured. As if he were studying a problem he couldn't solve. One evening, long after most employees had left, I remained in the office reviewing financial projections. The lights were dim. The city glittered beyond the glass walls. I didn't hear him approach. "You're still here." His voice came from behind me, deep, controlled. I turned slowly. So this was what he looked like outside of boardrooms. No jacket. Sleeves rolled slightly. Top button undone. Still composed. But less armored. "I could say the same," I replied. His eyes lowered briefly to the spreadsheets on my desk. "You redrafted the Q3 structure." "Yes." The previous model exposed us to unnecessary volatility. A small silence. Then, "You didn't ask for approval." I didn't need it. The tension between us wasn't hostility. It was friction. Sharp. Magnetic. His gaze lingered on my face again. Thoughtful this time. "You're not intimidated by me." It wasn't a question. I tilted my head slightly. Should I be? For the first time, the smallest shift. Not a smile, but something warmer than ice. Most people are. Most people don't look you in the eye, I replied. Something changed in the air. It wasn't romantic.
Not yet.
It was recognition. Two strong personalities colliding in a space that had never made room for softness. His phone buzzed. The moment shattered. He straightened instantly, CEO mask sliding back into place. Go home, miss. Avery, I said. Avery Thompson. His eyes held mine one last time. Miss Thompson. And he walked away. But from that night on, something invisible connected us. Meetings felt charged. Elevator rides felt shorter. Silences felt heavier. I told myself it was professional intensity. I told myself powerful men often study their top employees. I told myself I was imagining the way his gaze softened, just slightly, whenever he thought I wasn't looking. What I didn't know then was that the cold billionaire who intimidated the world had already started memorizing the sound of my voice. And ice only looks unbreakable until the right heat touches it. Kang Ji-Hoon was a man of structure. He woke at 5 a.m., worked out for exactly 47 minutes, ate the same breakfast every weekday, reviewed global market reports before sunrise touched the Han River.
Control was his religion.
Emotion was inefficiency, and relationships inside the company? Forbidden. He had written that policy himself. Yet somehow, I became the exception he never planned for. It started subtly. Small things. Things no one else would notice. He began requesting my presence in high-level meetings that didn't technically require my role. When international investors visited, I was suddenly part of the presentation team. When strategy calls ran late, he would dismiss everyone else except me. At 8 p.m., I asked one evening, standing at the doorway of his office. Yes. That couldn't wait until morning? His dark eyes lifted from his screen.
No.
But the report in question? It absolutely could have waited. His office felt different at night. The city lights reflected against the floor-to-ceiling windows. The skyline glowed. Seoul never truly slept, and neither, apparently, did he. I stood across from his desk, explaining revenue projections while he watched me with an intensity that had nothing to do with numbers. You changed your perfume, he said suddenly. I stopped mid-sentence. Excuse me? It's different from last week. My pulse skipped. I didn't realize CEOs tracked fragrance metrics. I track everything, he replied evenly. Silence stretched between us. He wasn't flirting. He wasn't smiling.
He was simply stating a fact.
And somehow that made it more unsettling. The next shift came during a tense executive review. One of the senior board members, older, dismissive, interrupted me halfway through a presentation. With respect, perhaps someone more familiar with the Korean market should lead this discussion. The room grew tight. It wasn't just a comment about experience. It was something else. I opened my mouth to respond, but I never got the chance. No, Ji-Hoon said calmly. The single word carried steel. She will finish. The board member hesitated. I only meant. I know what you meant, Ji-Hoon interrupted smoothly, though his eyes had hardened to something dangerous. And you're wrong. No raised voice. No emotional display. But the message was clear. He chose my authority over theirs. In his world, that was monumental. After that meeting, whispers followed me through the halls. Why does he favor her? She's new. He's never defended anyone like that. Even I started questioning it. One evening, as I packed my bag, I noticed his assistant approaching. Mr. Kang would like you to join him for dinner. It's regarding the Singapore merger.
Dinner.
Not drinks. Not a meeting.
Dinner.
I stared at the message on my phone longer than I should have. When I arrived at the private restaurant suite reserved under his name, he was already seated. No media. No entourage. No board members. Just him. This is business, he said before I could speak. Of course it is, I replied. But business dinners don't usually involve memorizing how someone takes their tea, or noticing they prefer jasmine over oolong, or watching the way candlelight softens the severity of their features. At one point, I laughed, genuinely, at something he said. The sound surprised both of us. He froze. Not annoyed.
Stunned.
As if laughter was a language he hadn't heard in years. You should do that more often, he said quietly. Laugh. Yes. And you? I asked. Do you ever? He held my gaze. Not until recently. The implication hovered between us like smoke. But the true crack in his armor came unexpectedly. It was raining the night, everything shifted. A heavy, relentless soul downpour. I had stayed late again, lost in spreadsheets, when the building lights flickered. A power surge. For a brief moment, the office went dark. Instinctively, I stepped back from my desk and collided into something solid. Or someone. His hands steadied me instantly.
Warm.
Firm. Protective. I've got you, he murmured. 3 words.
Low.
Close. Too close. When the emergency lights blinked on, we were inches apart. Close enough to feel his breath. Close enough to see something in his eyes that wasn't cold at all. It was hunger. Not physical. Not yet. Possessive. Like a man who had denied himself something too long and was starting to lose the discipline to continue. He released me slowly, but his fingers lingered at my waist a fraction too long. This is inappropriate, I said softly. Yes, he agreed. Neither of us stepped back. Days later, the company announced its annual corporate gala. Investors.
Media.
Industry elites. Mandatory attendance. When I received the official invitation, I didn't think much of it. Until his assistant delivered a garment box to my office.
For the gala, she said.
I didn't request a dress. Mr. Kang selected it personally. My heartbeat stumbled. That night, alone in my apartment, I opened the box. Red silk. Elegant. Powerful. Unapologetic. Not soft. Not delicate. Commanding. He hadn't chosen something to make me blend in. He chose something that would make me impossible to ignore. And that's when I understood. This wasn't accidental anymore. The late meetings. The defenses. The observation. The dinner.
The dress.
Kang Ji-Hoon, the man who built his empire on control, was losing it. Over me. And he hadn't even realized yet. That obsession and love often begin the same way. The night of the corporate gala felt like stepping into a different world. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling of the grand Hyatt ballroom, casting golden light over polished marble floors. The room shimmered with diamonds, tailored tuxedos, and the low hum of money discussing more money. This wasn't just a party. It was a display of power. And Kang Ji-Hoon stood at the center of it. Impeccable in a black tuxedo, posture straight, expression unreadable. Investors gravitated toward him. Executives laughed a little too hard at his rare comments. Cameras flashed discreetly from across the room. He looked untouchable, unmoved, uninterested, until I walked in. The red silk gown flowed like liquid fire against my skin. It hugged my curves without apology, elegant but bold, exactly the kind of statement a room like this wasn't used to seeing. Conversations faltered. Heads turned, and across the ballroom, Kang Ji-Hoon went completely still. His champagne glass paused midair. His dark eyes found me instantly.
Locked. Held.
Something dangerous flickered beneath his calm exterior. Not shock. Not disapproval.
Claim.
He recovered quickly, lowering his glass with deliberate control.
But I saw it.
The shift. The fracture in the ice. I hadn't expected him to approach me immediately. And he didn't. He stayed across the room, engaged in conversation, but his attention never truly left me. I could feel it. A steady, burning awareness at my back. When an international investor introduced himself, tall, charming, overly confident, I responded politely. You must be Mr. Kang's rising star, he said smoothly. I'm part of the team, I corrected gently. And the most captivating person in this room, he replied. I smiled professionally. He extended his hand. Dance? It would have been rude to refuse.
And strategically?
Smart. Networking mattered. So I said yes. The music was soft, strings and piano weaving through the air. As we moved onto the dance floor, I told myself it was harmless, professional, innocent. But the temperature in the room shifted. Across the ballroom, Kang Ji-Hoon's jaw tightened. He didn't move,
Didn't speak.
but the executives nearest him grew quiet, because they felt it too. That low, dangerous hum of restrained fury. From the dance floor, I saw him watching. Not casually, not curiously, intensely. His gaze followed every movement of the investor's hand at my waist. Every spin, every smile. The man leaned closer, whispering something I couldn't quite hear over the music. I laughed politely. And that was the moment Ji-Hoon moved. He crossed the ballroom with unhurried precision. Not fast enough to look impulsive. Not slow enough to suggest hesitation. Controlled. Always controlled. Until he reached us. The music continued. The room pretended not to notice. But everyone noticed. "Thank you," Ji-Hoon said to the investor, voice calm but edged in steel. "I'll take it from here." It wasn't a request. The investor hesitated. "We were just... I'm aware." 3 syllables. Sharp enough to cut glass. The investor released me. Ji-Hoon's hand replaced his, firm at my waist.
Warm.
Possessive. Too familiar. He didn't ask if I wanted to dance. He simply guided me. And I let him. The music slowed. Our bodies moved in rhythm, closer than ever before. His hand rested at the small of my back, fingers splayed as though reminding the world exactly where I stood. With him. "You don't need to entertain my competition," he said quietly. My heart thudded. I was networking. You were smiling. His voice dropped lower. "You smiled at him." I blinked. "Is that against company policy?" His jaw flexed. "Don't mock me." The tension between us was electric. "You don't own my smile," I said softly, though my pulse betrayed me. His hand tightened slightly at my waist. "I don't." The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. His eyes searched mine, not cold tonight, not distant. Something primal flickered there. Jealousy didn't look good on him. It looked lethal. The song ended, but he didn't let go. Applause filled the room politely. His thumb brushed lightly against the curve of my back, a gesture so subtle no one else would notice. "You wore the dress," he murmured. "You chose it. And you knew what it would do." Heat crawled up my spine. What would it do? His gaze dropped, just for a second, tracing the line of the red silk before returning to my eyes. "It makes it very difficult," he said evenly, "to pretend I'm unaffected." The honesty hit harder than the jealousy. Because Kang Ji-Hoon did not admit weakness. Ever. A group of executives approached, congratulating him on a recent acquisition. Cameras flashed again. Without thinking, instinctively, his hand slid from my waist to my lower back, holding me closer.
Publicly.
Territorially. Not a romantic gesture. A statement. "She is with me." And suddenly the whispers changed. Not curiosity. Not speculation. Recognition. The Ice King was burning. Later that night, on the balcony overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, I confronted him. "You embarrassed that man." He overstepped. "So did you." Wind tugged gently at my hair. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes. "He looked at you like he'd already claimed you," Ji-Hoon said quietly. "And that bothered you?" "Yes." No hesitation. No diplomacy. Just truth. The word hung between us, heavier than the skyline below. "You don't get jealous," I said. "I don't. But tonight?" His gaze softened, just slightly. "Tonight," he admitted, stepping closer, "I realized I don't like sharing." The air shifted. Dangerously. "You can't control this," I whispered. His hand lifted, not touching, hovering near my waist as if restraining himself. I know. That might have been the most vulnerable thing he'd ever said. Because for the first time, Kang Ji-Hoon wasn't in control of his empire. He wasn't in control of the room. He wasn't even fully in control of himself. He was a man watching something precious drift too close to someone else. And he hated it. As the gala lights shimmered behind us, one truth became undeniable. The cold billionaire wasn't just interested. He was possessive. And possessive men don't walk away quietly. They claim. There are moments in life when curiosity changes everything. For me, it happened on an ordinary Tuesday. The gala had ended 3 days ago, but its aftershocks still lingered. The whispers, the looks, the subtle shift in how executives addressed me, less dismissive now, more careful. Because everyone had seen it. The way Kang Ji-Hoon held me, the way he watched me, the way he didn't deny it. And yet he had returned to being cold, professional, untouchable. If anything, he was more controlled than before, which unsettled me more. That evening, I stayed late again, finalizing projections for the Singapore merger. The executive floor had emptied out. Even his assistant had left. I walked toward his office to leave a file on his desk. The door was slightly open. Strange. Ji-Hoon never left anything unsecured. I stepped inside. His office was pristine as always, dark wood, glass walls, minimalist perfection. I placed the folder down, and that's when I noticed it. A faint light glowing from the far corner. Behind a panel I had never seen open before. Curiosity pulled me closer. The panel wasn't a wall. It was a hidden door. And it wasn't fully shut. I should have walked away. I didn't. The room beyond wasn't large. But it wasn't empty either. One wall was covered in architectural sketches, future expansion models, innovation drafts, long-term strategic visions. That made sense. But the opposite wall. My breath caught. Photographs.
Dozens of them.
Company events. Press conferences. Candid office moments. Internal newsletters printed out. All of them had one common element.
Me.
A photo from my first presentation, mid-sentence focused. A screenshot from a televised financial interview, my name circled faintly in pen. A candid shot from the cafeteria, laughing at something unseen. Even a still image from security footage in the lobby, me adjusting my scarf during winter. Not inappropriate. Not invasive in a physical way. But deliberate. Collected. Studied. Carefully preserved. 2 years' worth. A slow realization chilled my spine. He hadn't started noticing me recently. He had been watching long before I ever sensed it. For how long were you planning to stand there? His voice cut through the silence behind me.
Low.
Controlled. Too controlled. I turned slowly. Kang Ji-Hoon stood in the doorway, jacket off, tie loosened, eyes darker than I had ever seen them. Not embarrassed. Not apologetic.
Exposed.
You weren't supposed to see this, he said. My heart pounded. What is this? He stepped inside, closing the hidden door quietly behind him. My weakness, he replied. The honesty stunned me. He moved closer to the wall of photographs, his gaze scanning them without shame. I document everything important, he said. Market shifts. Competitors. Risks. I swallowed. And I'm a risk?
He looked at me then.
Finally, fully. Yes. The word landed softly, but carried weight. For 2 years, he continued, voice steady but lower now, I have tried to determine whether you were temporary. Temporary? As in replaceable? I asked quietly.
His jaw tightened. No.
He stepped closer. As in survivable. The room felt smaller. You've been watching me for 2 years? I whispered. Observing, he corrected gently. That's not better. A faint, almost self-aware exhale left him. I don't do uncertainty well. And what am I? His gaze dropped briefly to one of the photos, the first presentation I ever gave in Seoul. You are the only variable in my life I cannot control. There it was. The crack. The confession hiding beneath discipline. He didn't touch me. Didn't reach for me. But the intensity between us felt physical. Why? I asked. Why me? His eyes softened, not weak, not fragile, but stripped of corporate armor. Because you don't bend. His voice lowered. Because you challenge me in rooms where no one else stares. A pause. Because you look at me like I'm a man, not an empire. The vulnerability in that admission stole my breath. You could have said something. I murmured. And risked losing access to you? He asked quietly. That was the truth beneath it all. Not lust. Not obsession in the reckless sense.
Fear.
Fear that if he crossed the line too soon, I would step away. And Kang Ji-Hoon was many things. But reckless wasn't one of them. He stepped even closer now, close enough that the space between us hummed. I memorized the way you prepare before presentations, he admitted. You adjust your watch twice. My pulse quickened. You tap your pen when you're annoyed.
He was right.
You avoid eye contact when you're truly hurt. The room felt dangerously intimate. You study me like data, I whispered. No, he said softly. Like something rare. That word changed everything. Because data can be replaced. Rare cannot. I should report this, I said weakly. You won't. His tone wasn't arrogant. It was certain. Why not? Because if this truly frightened you, his gaze held mine unwavering. You would have already walked out. He wasn't wrong. I was still there. Still standing inches from the most powerful man in the room. Still listening. Still wanting to understand. I don't know what to do with this, I admitted. Neither do I, he replied. And for the first time since I'd met him, Kang Ji-Hoon looked unsure.
Not weak.
Not fragile. Just human. I built an empire by eliminating risks, he said quietly. But you are the one risk I've kept. A slow breath passed between us. And now that I know? I asked. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was careful, reverent. I stopped pretending. The air thickened. Not with danger. With inevitability. Because secrets lose power once they're exposed. And now the truth stood between us. Undeniable. The cold billionaire hadn't just noticed me. He had chosen me. Long before I realized I was even an option. And the most dangerous part? He had no intention of letting go. Powerful men do not panic. They calculate. They anticipate. They neutralize threats before threats become visible. But even Kang Ji-Hoon could not control what was already growing beneath the surface. The board had been watching. Not just me. Him. The gala incident. The increased visibility of my role. The subtle shifts in hierarchy. Power circles notice everything. And they do not tolerate emotional weakness. The email arrived at 7:12 a.m. Subject line: Immediate strategic reassignment. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Effective immediately, I was being transferred back to the New York branch to strengthen cross-market integration. It was dressed in corporate language. But the message was clear. Remove the distraction. Remove the variable. Remove me. I sat very still. No tears. No dramatic reaction. Just quiet understanding. They thought I was the weakness. They thought distance would restore his control. Maybe they were right. By 10 a.m., the whispers had begun. I heard she's being relocated. Board decision. Too much attention. I packed slowly. Laptop. Notebooks. The red silk gala dress box tucked carefully into my bag. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't make a scene. I had built my career before Kang Ji-Hoon. I would survive after him. But as I stepped into the executive elevator for the last time, something inside my chest tightened. Not because I was leaving the company. Because I was leaving him. And neither of us had said what this really was. The lobby was quiet. Marble floors polished to perfection. Receptionists pretending not to stare. I rolled my suitcase behind me, head high. The revolving doors were only steps away. Then the elevator behind me opened. Slowly. Deliberately. A ripple of tension spread across the lobby. Because when Kang Ji-Hoon entered a room, people felt it. He didn't look composed. He didn't look calm. He looked furious. No jacket. Tie loosened. Eyes dark. His assistant hurried behind him, struggling to keep up. The entire lobby froze. His gaze found me instantly. And didn't leave. Who authorized this? His voice cut through the space like a blade. No one answered. Receptionists lowered their eyes. Managers shifted nervously. It was a board-level decision, someone finally muttered.
His jaw flexed.
Without my approval. Silence. That was answer enough.
He walked toward me.
Not rushed, but unstoppable. The marble floor echoed with each step. When he stopped in front of me, the air felt charged. "You're not leaving," he said. His voice was quieter now, but more dangerous. "It's not your decision," I replied softly. "It's already finalized."
"It isn't," he said.
The certainty in his tone sent a tremor through the room. "You don't have to fight this," I whispered. "This is your world. I was just visiting it." Something flickered across his face. Hurt. Real, unfiltered hurt. "You think that's what this is?" His voice lowered further. Intimate, even in a lobby full of witnesses. "You think you were temporary?" The word echoed from Chapter 4. Survivable. His hand reached for my suitcase handle, not aggressively, but firmly pulling it back from the doors. "You don't get to disappear because they're uncomfortable," he said. "It's not about them," I replied carefully. "It's about you." The truth hung heavy between us. If he challenged the board publicly, speculation would explode. His authority could fracture. Investors might question his leadership. Everything he built could destabilize. And all for me. "You'll lose leverage," I murmured. His eyes locked onto mine. "I don't care." The lobby collectively inhaled. Because Kang Ji-Hoon always cared. About optics. About positioning. About control. But not now. Board members emerged from the private elevator upstairs, clearly summoned by the disruption. "Mr. Kang," one of them began sharply, "this is not the place for—" "Yes," Ji-Hoon interrupted smoothly. "It is." He turned to face them fully now, standing between me and the exit. Protective. Intentional. "You moved a key executive without consulting me." "It was a strategic correction," the board member replied coolly. "Your recent behavior suggests compromised objectivity." There it was. Not subtle. Not coded. You allowed personal favoritism to cloud professional judgment. Every word was designed to provoke. To make him react emotionally. To prove their point. Instead, his expression went eerily calm. "You mistake protection for favoritism," he said evenly. "Protection?" Another board member scoffed.
His hand moved then. Slowly.
Deliberately. He reached back, not looking, and found my hand. Intertwined our fingers. In the middle of the corporate lobby. Gasps echoed. Cameras from discreet press personnel at the entrance snapped instinctively. He didn't let go. "If you remove her," he said calmly, voice carrying through the marble hall, "you remove the architect of our highest-performing expansion strategy." He paused. "And you undermine my authority." The challenge was clear. "Push her out and you challenge me." The board members hesitated. Because this was no longer about a transfer. It was about power. I squeezed his hand slightly. "You don't have to do this," I whispered. His thumb brushed over my knuckles, subtle, grounding. "I know," he replied. And that was what made it monumental. He wasn't reacting impulsively. He was choosing. "I built this company from nothing," he continued, addressing the board. "Not by eliminating strength, but by recognizing it." His gaze flickered briefly toward me. "She stays." 3 words. Final. Not emotional. Not dramatic. A decision. Silence stretched for several long seconds. Then one board member exhaled sharply. "We'll revisit this in a private session." Ji-Hoon didn't respond. Because he had already won. When the board retreated, the lobby slowly resumed breathing. Whispers swelled immediately. Speculation ignited. But none of it mattered. Because he was still holding my hand. Still standing between me and the world. "You risked everything," I said quietly once we were alone enough. His eyes softened slightly. "No," he corrected gently. I clarified what was already mine to protect. The words sent warmth through my chest. This wasn't a public claim. Not yet. But it was a declaration of allegiance. He chose me over optics, over ease, over silence. And powerful men don't do that lightly. As we stepped back into the elevator together, the doors closing on the stunned lobby behind us, one thing was undeniable. The Empire had felt the tremor. And Kang Ji-Hoon had just drawn a line. Next time, he wouldn't just defend me.
He would claim me.
The emergency board session was called for 6 p.m. By 5:45, every executive who mattered was seated. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the darkening Seoul skyline. The Han River shimmered beneath the evening lights, indifferent to the storm brewing 42 floors above it. This was not a routine meeting. Investors had dialed in. Legal counsel was present. 2 members of the press waited discreetly outside, notified by someone who smelled scandal. And at the center of it all, Kang Ji-Hoon sat at the head of the table. Still, immovable, unreadable. I sat 3 seats down, technically present to address strategic concerns. Unofficially, I was the concern. The board chairman cleared his throat. We are here to discuss executive conduct and the long-term stability of this corporation. Translation: your feelings are becoming expensive. A senior board member leaned forward. Mr. Kang, your public display earlier today has raised serious questions about impartial leadership. Ji-Hoon didn't blink. My leadership increased company valuation by 38% this fiscal year, he replied calmly. Be specific. The chairman's jaw tightened. Your personal attachment to Miss Thompson is compromising operational objectivity. There it was. Not rumor. Not implication. Accusation. The air grew heavy. Every eye shifted to Ji-Hoon. Waiting.
Testing.
Hoping he would retreat into logic. Into coldness. Into distance. Instead, he leaned back slowly, laced his fingers together, and said nothing. Silence in a boardroom is more terrifying than shouting. Another director spoke up. She has become a distraction. A pause. We recommend immediate reassignment. Permanently. My spine straightened. I kept my expression neutral. Professional. If I showed emotion now, they would weaponize it. The chairman turned toward me. Miss Thompson, you understand this is not personal. Of course it was. But I simply nodded once. Then, the chair at the head of the table moved. Ji-Hoon stood.
Slowly. Deliberately.
The room instinctively went quiet. He adjusted the cuff of his sleeve. A small gesture.
Precise.
Controlled. But his eyes? They were no longer ice. They were fire under glass. You call her a distraction, he began calmly. She restructured our North American expansion and recovered a projected $40 million deficit. No one spoke. She identified the Singapore merger risk none of you saw. A subtle shift. Unease creeping across polished faces. You question my judgment? He stepped away from the head of the table. Not pacing. Not dramatic. Strategic. You mistake emotional visibility for weakness. His gaze moved to me briefly, not soft, not fragile.
Certain.
Then, he did something no one expected. He walked around the table and stopped beside me. Not across from me. Not observing from power's throne. Beside me. Gasps echoed softly. The chairman stiffened. Mr. Kang, I advise. You advise? Ji-Hoon interrupted gently. His hand moved then. Firm. Confident. He took mine. In front of everyone. Intertwined our fingers. No hesitation. No subtlety. A visible claim. The room erupted in quiet shock. Investors on screen leaned forward. One board member muttered, "Unbelievable." Ji-Hoon ignored them. She is not a distraction, he said clearly. His voice carried, deep, steady, resonating against marble and glass. She is the most capable strategist in this company. He squeezed my hand slightly. And she is under my protection. The chairman's face hardened. Protection from what? Ji-Hoon's gaze sharpened. From insecure men threatened by competence. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Explosive. A board member scoffed. You're allowing personal feelings to dictate corporate policy. Ji-Hoon didn't look at him. He looked at me, then back at the room. Yes. The word hit like a gunshot. Shock rippled across the table. He didn't retract it.
Didn't soften it.
Yes, he repeated. Because I refuse to treat excellence as expendable simply to preserve fragile egos.
His arm moved then.
slowly wrapping around my waist. Not rushed. Not desperate. Intentional. This company stands because I built it, he continued evenly. And I decide who stands with me. No one dared interrupt. If any member of this board believes my judgment is compromised. He paused, letting it settle. They are welcome to challenge my position. A direct challenge. Not emotional. Strategic. Because removing Kang Ji-Hoon would cost investors billions. No one spoke. No one moved. They couldn't. He had turned the narrative. This wasn't about romance. It was about authority. Then he said the words that shattered the last illusion of distance. She is mine. Not loud. Not shouted. But absolute. Gasps echoed. Legal counsel shifted nervously. The chairman's face paled slightly. But Ji-Hoon didn't flinch. Not as property, he clarified calmly. As partner. As equal. As the woman I choose. The air changed. This was no longer corporate tension. This was personal revelation wrapped in power. He didn't hide it. Didn't deny it. Didn't protect his image. He chose transparency. He chose me.
Publicly.
Irrevocably. I looked up at him then. And for the first time since I met Kang Ji-Hoon, there was no CEO mask. No calculation. Just a man who had reached the edge of restraint and stepped over it willingly. You didn't have to do that, I whispered softly. His thumb brushed gently against my waist. I know. And that made it everything. The chairman cleared his throat stiffly. This meeting is adjourned. Because there was nothing left to argue. He hadn't lost control. He had redefined it. Executives filed out in stunned silence. Investors logged off. The empire would wake tomorrow to headlines. Speculation. Market tremors. But tonight, the boardroom belonged to us. When the doors finally closed and we were alone, Ji-Hoon released a slow breath. The smallest crack in composure. You may hate me for that, he said quietly. I searched his face. Why would I? Because I made us visible. I stepped closer. You didn't make us visible. I lifted our joined hands slightly. You made us undeniable. For the first time, Kang Ji-Hoon smiled. Not the polite, controlled curve from press conferences. Not the faint flicker of amusement. A real one. Small.
But devastating.
And in that moment, I understood something powerful. Cold men don't burn for everyone. But when they do, they burn in front of the world. The headlines exploded before sunrise. Tech billionaire declares love in boardroom showdown. Kang Ji-Hoon defies board over executive partner. Romance or power move. Speculation flooded every financial outlet in Seoul and then New York. Stock prices fluctuated. Analysts debated. Social media burned. But inside the top-floor penthouse overlooking the Han River, it was quiet, peaceful,
Still.
for the first time since the storm began. I stood barefoot near the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city wake beneath soft morning light. The river shimmered gently, indifferent to scandal. Behind me, I heard the faint rustle of movement. Kang Ji-Hoon was not a man who slept deeply. But last night after the boardroom, he had. Not restless, not tense, just still, as if something inside him had finally unclenched. You're reading the news, he said quietly. I turned. He stood a few steps away, no suit, no tie, no armor. Just loose black trousers and a simple white shirt, slightly wrinkled.
Human.
I've been called worse than a distraction before, I said lightly. His jaw tightened slightly at that. I should have protected you from this, he murmured. You did. He stepped closer. No, he corrected softly. I protected my choice. That's different. The honesty in that statement wrapped around me. Most powerful men would have spun the narrative, reframed it, denied vulnerability. But Ji-Hoon never lied once the truth was spoken. Are you afraid? I asked gently. He didn't answer immediately. He rarely did. When Kang Ji-Hoon chose words, they were intentional. Yes, he admitted finally. Not about the board. Not about investors. Not about market value. I've built everything in my life on certainty, he continued. Predictable outcomes. Measured risks. He stepped close enough now that I could feel the warmth of him. You are none of those things. I smiled slightly. Is that a complaint? It terrifies me. His voice dropped lower. Because I cannot outmaneuver losing you. The vulnerability in that sentence held more weight than any boardroom declaration. The world feared this man. Men twice his age respected him. Competitors strategized around him. Governments negotiated with him. And here he was, admitting fear, not of failure, of love. I stepped closer, closing the remaining distance. You didn't lose me, I said softly. His hands hovered at my waist, as they had so many times before, but this time there was no audience. No tension. No claim to prove. Just instinct. I spent 2 years convincing myself distance was discipline, he confessed quietly. That observing you was safer than wanting you. His thumb brushed lightly against my side. But the moment they tried to remove you, he exhaled slowly. I stopped caring about safe. And that was the truth of it. The boardroom wasn't about ego. It wasn't about possession. It was about a man realizing that control meant nothing if it cost him the person who made his world feel less mechanical. Later that week, the market stabilized. Investors relaxed after Ji-Hoon released a calm, precise public statement reaffirming leadership continuity. He never denied us. Never labeled it scandal. Never hid. Instead, he did something even more shocking. He brought me to the next executive summit. Not behind him. Beside him. Introduced, not as a subordinate,
but as
our strategic director. Equal ground. Equal voice. The room noticed. Respect shifted. And slowly, resistance softened into reluctant acceptance. Because Kang Ji-Hoon did not make impulsive decisions. And if he had chosen me publicly, then I was not a weakness. I was a constant. That night, weeks after the storm quieted, we stood on the private rooftop terrace of his penthouse. Seoul glittered endlessly below. The air was cool, but his coat rested around my shoulders. You changed, I said softly. He glanced down at me. In what way? You smile now. A faint curve touched his lips. Rarely. More than before.
He considered that.
Perhaps. Then his expression grew thoughtful. I built an empire from nothing, he said quietly. Every partnership calculated. Every expansion precise. He turned fully toward me. But you. His hand gently lifted mine. You are the only decision I made without calculation. My heart swelled. And, do you regret it? His answer came, without hesitation.
No.
The wind moved gently around us. The city lights reflected in his dark eyes, no longer cold. Not distant. Not guarded.
Warm.
Grounded.
Real.
I don't want to be protected, I told him softly. His brow furrowed slightly. I want to be chosen. He stepped closer, forehead resting gently against mine. I will choose you, he said quietly. Even when it costs me. A promise. Not dramatic. Not theatrical. But unshakable. And in that moment I realized something profound. The world saw a cold billionaire who ruled with logic. But I saw the man who stayed awake memorizing my habits. Who fought an entire boardroom for my presence. Who risked reputation for partnership. Who melted not because he was weak, but because he finally allowed himself to feel. The Ice King did not thaw for the world. He thawed for me. And this time, he didn't just claim me. He kept choosing me.